God is watching Russia, and it isn't very happy with what it sees. No, we're not talking about a literal God here, but Russia will feel like it could be. This is as close to a God's eye as anybody is going to get. An all-seeing eye in the sky that sees, informs, and enables Ukraine to carry out operations in ways that it's never been able to before. Russia can't hide. It can't pray the God's eye away. All it can do is know that it's being watched by Dutch technology that gives Ukraine real-time data and spells disaster for Russian forces attempting to make moves. Imagine a device that a soldier can carry that looks almost like a handheld video game console, but serves a very different purpose. The soldier isn't using this device to play a few games of Tetris. The screen is filled with images, and each one is being beamed to the device from satellites in as close to real time as possible. As the soldier taps away at screens and buttons, the images shift. The soldier is searching, backed by a mobile command center that is full of computers that have access to commercial satellites, all of which are feeding images back. More swiping and pressing. In a handful of minutes, the images have revealed what the soldier needs to do next. A flight plan has been plotted, with the images guiding the pilot through air defense installations, or targets have been located on the ground that can be attacked with drones, artillery, or whatever weapon is deemed most effective at wiping that target off the map. In some cases, the frontline soldier isn't just receiving images from the satellites. They can use their clever device to control the feeds from the satellites themselves, allowing them to potentially zoom in, explore other areas, and verify target locations. It sounds like it's a technology pulled straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's real. This is God's Eye, or to give the device its actual name, the Bravo 1 Alpha Close Satellite Support, or CSS. Dutch in origin, but made possible by a wider web of satellites and collaboration that we'll be exploring later. This brilliant tool has given Ukraine's soldiers access to intelligence that was never thought possible when Putin launched his invasion. Ukraine can now see what Russia is doing when Russia is doing it. And that means Ukraine can react with lightning-fast speed to stop offensives, launch counterattacks, and even take out Russian logistics. All of this has been revealed by an August 17th New York Times article, which reveals that the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS isn't some faraway concept. It's being used in Ukraine as we speak, thanks to a concerted Dutch effort to get it up and running, and it's changing everything about how Ukraine fights its war with Russia. We don't know a huge amount about the specifics of Bravo 1 Alpha CSS, at least when it comes to technical specifications. What we do know comes from scattered news reports and some insight provided by the manufacturer itself. For a start, we know that this God's Eye collaboration between Ukraine and the Netherlands has been in the works for a long time before the news of Bravo 1 Alpha CSS being in use was revealed. If we head back to May 2025, a handful of reports appeared suggesting that Dutch industry had presented a new concept to Ukraine that would provide the country's soldiers with faster support from space. The plan at the time appeared to be the construction and launch of a new range of satellite systems capable of detecting Russian communication and radar systems from space, allowing Ukraine to identify potential threats as they emerged. Former Dutch Secretary of Defense Gijs Tienman said at the time that he was asking the Dutch space industry for a fast-track solution, stating, "The urgency is great, and we all realize that. Money, knowledge, and resources go hand in hand." The seed of the idea for Bravo 1 Alpha CSS appears to have been planted right around this time, though the Dutch weren't and still aren't in the position to use their own satellites to provide the real-time data that is now being fed to Ukrainian troops. That doesn't mean that the Netherlands hasn't been making positive moves on the satellite front. The Royal Netherlands Air and Space Force has been created, as has an official Dutch Space Command. By 2028, the latter is expected to be a fully operational command that will have several hundred active members, Table.Briefings reports. On June 24, 2025, the Netherlands also conducted the launch of a rocket carrying the first operational synthetic aperture radar that will be used by the Dutch armed forces. But the much larger constellation of satellites needed to get the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS up and running isn't quite in the Dutch remit. Yet we know that this system is being used by Ukraine. How then? Collaboration has been the key. Unable to provide Ukraine with its own satellites, the Netherlands has instead looked to others. Working alongside commercial satellite providers, the Netherlands has created the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS to be a God's eye in more than just the amount of data and the real-time images that it's provided to Ukraine. This device is a symbol of unity and the strength of partnerships that are being formed to counter Russian aggression. The Wall Street Journal revealed all of this in a June 4th article where it reported that the satellite imagery systems that Ukraine now uses now combine Bravo 1 Alpha CSS, which is the handheld tech, and mobile control centers we mentioned earlier, with contributions from other companies. Vantor is involved, as is a US-based company named Persistent Systems and a Ukrainian firm named Imagery. Several of these companies are commercial rather than military enterprises. Vantor, for instance, is a commercial business that has already been working with Ukraine for several years, and it launches satellites regularly. The company's constellation can collect more than 3.5 million square kilometers of 30-centimeter class imagery every single day, Vantor says, and its Legion satellites revisit the same location on Earth as many as 15 times per day. That's just a taste of the kind of tech that the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS has made accessible to Ukraine. Up-to-date activity, tracking, and mapping are all made possible by this constellation. As for the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS itself, Bravo 1 Alpha claims that it was designed specifically to bridge the critical gap between strategic-level satellite capabilities and frontline execution. In practice, this amounts to the control system behind the device receiving images in real time and assigning tasks based on the intelligence those images provide. There's an element of artificial intelligence at play, as the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS uses AI to reduce image processing times, along with offering automated analysis that speeds up decision-making. Data also flows through the Dutch system and into battlefield management systems. Bravo 1 Alpha points to Ukraine's Delta system by name. That system has been deployed across all levels of Ukraine's defense forces since August 2025. And it provides untold amounts of data derived from footage recorded by reconnaissance and strike drones to satellite imagery beaming in via the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS. Data also comes in the form of 3D coordinates, line-of-sight analysis, and even confidence grading related to the viability of a strike, again feeding into Ukraine's ability to use its Dutch God's eye to figure out what to strike, when, and crucially, whether a strike is even possible in the first place. Transport yourself into the boots of a Ukrainian soldier for a moment. Dozens of kilometers away from a Russian position, you park your mobile command center. Inside are analysts receiving constant satellite images from the various constellations that are compatible with the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS. You're waiting with your handheld device and drones are loaded with bombs at the ready. As little as a year ago, none of what you're about to do would have been possible. Satellite images took days to reach you. By the time you had the lay of the land, everything would have changed as Russia's forces moved, but now, the process has been streamlined. You still have to wait, but the time can be measured in minutes or hours rather than days. A whole new category of targets opens up as the intelligence comes flooding in from the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS. Mobile drone squads, vehicles, and anything capable of moving can now be struck. The words come through from the truck. The target has been confirmed, and approval has already been received from a senior commander. Now it's time to get to work. Perhaps you pull up more data. Footage from Delta may help you determine a flight path for your drones, along with the intelligence from Bravo 1 Alpha. But the result is what matters. In just a few hours or less, you go from positioning yourself to actually striking. The Russian target goes down. You and your team move on to the next one. This is just a little taste of what's possible for Ukraine now, thanks to the God's eye in the sky providing images of the battlefield like never before. The impact has been immense, and the damage done to Russia as a result of this technology is almost immeasurable. But before we dig into that, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If this is the kind of insight that you want to see, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We break it down like this every single day. We'll take a look at what tech like the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS has offered to Ukraine through a wide lens first. Technology like this, offering access to commercial satellites and their imagery, has changed the game for Ukraine. In a June 5th report, United 24 Media revealed that Ukraine has managed to shorten its kill chain, which is the period from target identification to strike, by as much as 90%, all because soldiers now have access to satellite images that are beamed directly to them. Handheld devices like the ones we've discussed can receive those images, but so can tablets, laptops, and phones, depending on the specific technology that Ukraine is using. Ukraine has also adapted its internal command flows to meet the speed offered by having access to real-time commercial satellites. Commanders still have to give the okay for a strike, but Ukraine no longer requires that all satellite intelligence undergo a centralized review in Kyiv. Those reviews aren't needed anymore. They existed to help Ukraine determine if what the days-old images they had been receiving showed them was still relevant ahead of a strike. Now that real-time images are being received, the review can be bypassed, and a soldier can have that image open on their device within 15 minutes, United 24 Media reports. The impact is obvious. And not just when it comes to the speed of the strikes. Without the need for reviews, Ukraine is able to free up work hours that can be used in other ways. Reviews also cost money, along with time. And that money can also serve other purposes now that Ukraine has its God's eye in the sky. Then there's the collaboration aspect of all of this. Bravo 1 Alpha and the various systems it requires have led to increased collaboration between Ukraine, the Netherlands, and the United States through commercial and military channels. You could even argue that Ukraine has become a testing ground for this new approach to satellite technology, as it has been for so many other weapons systems. It's likely no coincidence that the US Special Operations Command has added software that can transmit images from commercial satellites to soldiers' devices. Ukraine has proved that the approach works and has refined it to the point that it's making Russia pay, and the US is learning lessons from all of this. Speaking of making Russians pay, that's what it's all about. In its report, the New York Times says that the use of this real-time satellite technology has been key to Ukraine's isolation of Crimea over the past few months. The outlet points to Ukraine's rampage against Shadow Fleet vessels and ferry terminals, which have both been made possible by up-to-date satellite data showing when Russian ships are loading and where they are going after. Ukraine has hit around 220 ships in the Black Sea and Sea of Azov, and it all seems to be due to the God's eye that constantly watches over Russia. Putin will be livid. He knows that Russia can't do anything about this non-stop flow of information short of shooting the satellites Ukraine is using out of orbit, and that's hardly a feasible solution. Instead, he has to watch as his control over Crimea burns. After all, it's not just the Shadow Fleet tankers and misappropriated ferries that Ukraine is able to target with its satellite data. Ahead of those strikes, and continuing as we speak, Ukraine has been attacking Russian vehicles as they make their way along the logistical routes that connect Crimea, Russia, and the occupied territories. For those strikes to happen, Ukraine needs to know where the vehicles are, and it's likely that Bravo 1 Alpha has a pretty big role to play here. Ukraine's Crimean isolation strategy has been one of its highlights in 2026, and that means it's also been one of Russia's lowlights. The strategic prize that Putin has held over Ukraine's head since the illegal annexation of 2014 has been turned into a weakness as Crimea is ravaged by fuel shortages, power cuts, and supply issues, all due to Ukraine's strikes. Putin can't just give up the peninsula. That would represent a broken promise to his people, as well as recognition of his abject failure to protect Crimea. So Russia keeps sending weapons, troops, and supplies, and Ukraine keeps smashing all of it with drones. And Ukraine can do it all without sacrificing soldiers, as the Royal United Services Institute points out. In the south, the Ukrainians don't have to put troops in to try and cut off the land bridge between Russia proper and Crimea. If they can get fire control over it so that their drones can sort of cover that area and target logistics going west to east and east to west, then it has the same effect, which is actually to isolate Crimea, the Institute says, adding, so the position in the south of the country has changed remarkably in the last couple of months. That mention of southern Ukraine leads us to another way that the God's eye has been a massive benefit. Ukraine is using its satellite footage for strikes in occupied Zaporizhzhia. That's according to the New York Times, which highlights how June saw soldiers from the 422nd Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment use satellite images to destroy facilities that Russia has set up in occupied Zaporizhzhia. Those facilities existed to jam Starlink signals, so Ukraine got to both take out a threat and reinforce its own offensive capabilities, all due to the God's eye. Zaporizhzhia and the surrounding regions have become a major problem for Russia, both because of its loss of Starlink connectivity and due to Ukraine having access to all of this satellite imagery. According to an August 14th Euronews report analyzing data produced by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukraine has reclaimed about 600 square kilometers in the southeast during the past 6 months. That amounts to 26 settlements liberated, including 4 in Zaporizhzhia, and it's due to strikes like the ones that the New York Times recalls that help make these targeted advances possible. Russia's situation in Zaporizhzhia has degraded to the point where its artillery units can't get in range of the city that bears the region's name, leaving Russia to rely on drone and bomb assaults from the air rather than making any actual progress on the ground. What we're seeing here is the emergence of a new frontier in the Ukraine war. Reconnaissance conducted in real time from space is transforming how Ukraine fights. And we're not just talking about the transition from days-old satellite images to up-to-date photos here. Think about reconnaissance drones. There's no doubt that these drones are important, and they can provide their own real-time footage of the field, but they're also visible, and that makes them vulnerable to being shot down. Signals can also be jammed, rendering a reconnaissance drone useless. Every failed drone mission also adds cost to Ukraine, and that's without even getting to the limited ranges and ground that a reconnaissance drone can cover. We're not saying that these drones have suddenly become useless, far from it. But now Ukraine has other options flying so high that Russia can't touch them, and the Bravo 1 Alpha CSS lies at the heart of it all. Russia can only watch and weep, and the tears fall harder when the Kremlin thinks about its own satellite imagery. Russia has never been one of the leaders of the pack when it comes to using satellites to examine the battlefield. Even so, Ukraine and Russia's own failures have combined to put Russia a long way behind Ukraine in this particular aspect of the war. As far back as May 2024, Ukraine has petitioned satellite companies to stop taking images of the country's territory, or at the very least, ensure that Russia doesn't have access to those images. In 2026, Ukraine has found a way to make access to those images pay off, and Russia certainly doesn't have access to the sort of up-to-date pictures that Ukraine has. Russia's own satellites are also weak, Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty reports, so weak that Russia has likely been relying on data from Chinese satellites, though the Kremlin denies that Beijing delivers any battlefield data. But as Clayton Swope, who is a 14-year CIA veteran, tells the outlet, Russia's infrastructure is pretty old and creaky. It really seems like a no-brainer that if China is willing to offer either something from a company or from its own government capabilities, Russia will take advantage of that. Ukraine is in the same boat as Russia when it comes to its homegrown satellite technology, but Ukraine's allies are the difference maker. We see that in the Bravo 1 Alpha and all of the companies from at least 3 different nations that combine to ensure Ukraine has access to the satellite imagery that it has in 2026. The God's eye is bearing down on Russia. The Kremlin has nothing it can use that is anywhere near as effective. As long as that's the case, Ukraine will have a distinct advantage on the battlefield, whereas Russia will still be stuck operating with old data. Ukraine continues to rewrite the rules of war, and the God's eye isn't the only example. Ukraine's Air Force actively defies every military rule, and it works. Find out how and why by watching our video. But before you go, if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and let us know your thoughts below. You can also become a channel member for access to exclusive content we don't publish publicly. And thank you for watching.